to DysFictional, an RPG-focused podcast. I'm Tukey, the former academic gone rogue.
I'm Randy, the random generator.
And I'm Ginger, professional film industry victim. What are we talking about today, guys?
I mean, I think it's a good opportunity, as we've had a lot of topics about our campaigns and everything like that. I had a few of the characters generators going on. Why don't we talk about how we go about using stats into our characters? Specifically, stuff like backstories or some of the stats like strength or dexterity. Maybe we can go to more in the depth later on about each stat.
Great. What's your favorite stat?
Wisdom.
Dexterity.
What stat do you think is your highest stat in real life?
Wisdom.
All of them?
Yeah, he believes he's a maxed out character. That's why he has low wisdom.
Okay.
All of them?
Yep.
Oh, wait, sorry, that was the last answer.
So what you're talking about is a mode of character creation where you roll the stats and base the character's personality and backstory around your rolls?
I would say it can go either way. So, yeah, you could do it that way, or you could have where your character's created, you got all of your stuff picked out. Now, what do I do with them? Because you can have all your stats and you rolled them out and stuff, but maybe you can make an RP purpose out of it, like a person with low constitution who's constantly sick all the time. You could have a person with high constitution who's constantly eating poison because they're like, it's probably fine, I can take it. Kind of the opposite of those. You can still have a low person. I always love giving the SpongeBob example where a low strength person who thinks he's really strong or pretends he's really strong, but he's really not. So he's got them like inflatable arms. It's a fun idea. Or constantly giving excuses as to why they're not using their strength as an example.
So I folded it into a few different things before. So I folded stats into like hobbies as one example. And it could be directly or even the opposite, right? So maybe someone's really dexterous. So, in their hobbies, why could they be really dexterous? Well, maybe they just like to dance a lot or go running a lot or something that would improve their dexterity. Or at the same time, maybe they have a hobby like knitting because they're very dexterous with their hands. And then you could also even go the opposite route where, there's someone who's really strong, but then they want to do like glass blowing, right? Something that takes a lot of like being
finesse.
Very careful with something fragile. Yeah, finesse.
And I would even say from there, that can tie in something like you said with strength, but then you could have an expertise or even just proficiency in sleight of hand, which the whole purpose of it isn't for stealing or anything like that. It's for the intricacies of glass blowing.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I think that's just a small example of using them, and I could even go into a depth of how to use stats in many different ways. Each of them has their cool aspect to it, and you don't have to use every single one of them. Like every wizard is probably going to have low strength, but that doesn't mean you need to go around and be like, I can't pick that up, I'm sorry. You just kind of ignore certain stats, but some of them you kind of want to roll into your character. Tukey, you have Silica as a good example, as a character who has a high charisma, but doesn't really like talking to people or chatting or anything like that. And in fact, it's a interesting perspective when we have another high charisma person in the party who actually started off as being kind of the jerk of the group, but actually is really good with talking to the NPCs.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that because with Silica, technically high charisma, but whenever she even did talk to people, a lot of times, especially new people, she used an alternate persona for it. Kind of had a different voice, a different like personality for when she was dealing with people. So that was actually part of where I think the charisma came in with her. It wasn't really her herself. It was just the ability for her to put on this fake face when needed, I suppose.
Your customer service voice.
100%.
Hello, this is Silica, and how may I slay today? So I think another good example, as to kind of go more general with going through kind of the character sheet and stuff like that, and then we can always go more in depth at another time, because I personally think that you could do a whole segment on each stat individually on the character sheet, but race is always a good opportunity to add character development growth, because like I had the dwarf who was raised by elves, so he's actually a dwarf who has a lot of elf features, and kind of mixed with the DM that allowed elven training versus dwarven training, so things like that. That was a cool flavor addition, and it did add mechanics, but overall it's just changing the same thing for another. It's not like I provided myself with the ability to trance or something like that, because that's not what a dwarf would be able to do, even being with them. But then you have tieflings, for example, that have usually a subline of potential racism because they look like devils and stuff, and people can find them scary and frightening. Goblins are a very similar aspect to a lot of the evil races as well. Yuan Ti is a perfect example that they're actually pretty brewed in, that other races find them scary and stuff, and they could not be that and go against the stereotype.
Or you could have characters who accidentally build stereotypes into the world by going and basically robbing a lot of treasuries in different cities and constantly disguising as a tabaxi over and over and over again, and then starts to get accused as that, because apparently tabaxi are not that common in this area.
Yeah, but who would do that?
Right.
Yeah, always be aware of your surroundings, folks. You never know.
Sorry, I mean alleged crimes.
Yeah.
Alleged.
Yeah.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Is that how it works in the D&D world?
Some of them.
I don't think so.
I mean,
It feels a little more the other way lately.
Well, yeah. Mine's guilty until you're dead.
Wait, but I've already died multiple times, so am I not guilty anymore?
It's more the Salem route where, like, oh, the crimes are still happening. Well, I guess that person was innocent, but they're dead now, so whatever.
If it's guilty until you're dead, but you've already died, is that like double jeopardy? Like, is it time served and you're good to go now? Or
I don't know. I never watched Jeopardy.
Randy.
Yeah, I had to.
Take 1d4 pun damage.
But yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. And then going back to the character sheet, I mean, you can even add like hit points or armor class, stuff like that. Because I think a underutilized feature with armor class is just because you have a high armor class doesn't mean that it's because you have a lot of armor on. Haste actually is a great example that you're faster, you're more dexterous, but your AC goes up, and it's because you're good at dodging. Like, you just don't get hit by the attacks, you jump around and things like that. And that's a really good use of the armor class, and people that especially love to implement their own like flavor into their characters may often opt for a dexterous character being more of a dodgy, quick go, or doing something like a parry, or the route of taking an attack.
Or again, doing the opposite and being a rogue, very dexterous, and then just sitting and soaking the hits anyway. But I mean, again, who would possibly
Yeah,
do that?
exactly.
Crazy person.
Yeah.
With a death wish. With a constant death wish.
I mean, thirst for battle. I don't
Which,
know.
I mean, speaking of Death Wish, that's also a good opportunity to roll in character too. As I think we've said before, there are aspects of death that some characters will take literally no direction against. They won't think about death as any sort of real consequence or stuff, and some people be just terrified the crap out of it. I think that can tie in with backgrounds and stuff, especially too. Like, if you're a soldier, you've probably been surrounded by death or something like that, versus a similar vein of a city watch where you're still of a sort of military style, but you're not probably surrounded by death, more like crime, and they sort of desensitized to certain aspects of crime like that.
Yeah, no, this one I've definitely played a few different ways, like you mentioned, where I know I had sort of like a protector style barbarian. I think I can't remember. I think he actually may have had like the soldier background or something. But yeah, I think he died and was pretty much just got back up and was like, oh, all right, what was I doing? Like, didn't really think of anything of it at all. And then definitely have had other characters, even the current one that I'm playing, where went down and was like sort of afterward acting a bit different for a while because of the death itself. Not necessarily even being afraid of the death, which of course you could do too. Like maybe someone goes down and then they're real hesitant in combat again, or stay ranged because they just don't want to go close to anything again. In this case, it was more they went down and they were just like rethinking how they're being a leader or what choices they were making for a little while, whether they wanted to even come back. That's another big one too. We can get maybe more into that in a second, but like maybe your character doesn't want to come back if they go down. Always different things they can decide.
And even one of our friends actually provided like the opportunity when he died to actually change up his equipment. He added a shield and stuff because he's like, I don't like getting hurt, so I'm gonna try to help with that. And then I've had characters that, like my druid, who, you know, had the faith that he would come back, or if he dies, whatever, doesn't matter. And then my artificer, who was like, nah, man, fuck this, I'm out.
And there's also opportunities to like give some goals to the group, right? Like we had one campaign a little while ago where someone in the group went down, and it almost became like what we needed to do for the next bit, like bring their body somewhere to be resurrected, essentially. So then that player had like a side character for a bit. I think they actually had multiple side characters, but you know, that became sort of the focus for the group for a while was, okay, we got to get this character back to life because we know that we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I typically work the opposite way. Like I like to reverse engineer my builds. So usually I usually do like the point buy instead of like a roll for stats. Because I always like to pick the class and subclass first and then build the RP potential out from there and then just sort of roll to support that, or point buy to support that rather. So I haven't really thought about picking specific stats as like RP choices in the past too much, but it could be fun.
Well, and I mean, you don't necessarily have to do as a before as well. Like, while you can build a class with stats that aren't favorable towards the class that's nerfing your character unless you're doing it intentionally, which is always, you know, another fun aspect to do. But you pick the stats first, and then you pick which ones you kind of want to do, if you want to do them at all. It's just like a low intelligence person doesn't need to always just be dumb. You can just be, you know, average intelligence or whatever. Same thing again, strength is another common one that's usually a dump stat. But then sometimes you do want to play that one. Like almost all my characters, my druid, my artificer, and my sorcerer are all low strength characters, but it was my sorcerer who chose to use strength as I don't like picking up anything, and kind of made a point of not wanting to almost use her body for anything more than walking. She's too good to pick up items.
The other thing I was thinking too is, even with these stats, is what does the number itself mean to you, right? Like what does an 8 in intelligence actually mean to one player or another player for their character? Because, you know, maybe an 8 in intelligence, for just as an example, could be that person, yeah, then maybe they're just not interested in reading or learning too much, but they're not dumb in any way or anything. Or maybe they are. Maybe you want to play someone who's just really silly and goofy the whole time. But I think the number itself can also mean a lot of different things. Again, you know, 8, 10, 12, whatever it is for whatever stat, you can kind of play with as well. And it doesn't always mean, oh, if I have low, you know, wisdom or low charisma, like, oh, I can't talk to people or something. It doesn't have to mean that. It could just be, you know, folded in other ways.
I mean, I loved my half minotaur tiefling Rin as a good example of a low charisma person, because they love talking to people and thought they had a high charisma score in terms of a sort of meta of that. They thought they were really good at talking to people, and then they're like, wow, you shouldn't say that out loud. Like, oh, hey, did you know that like your hair would be a lot nicer if it was up? Like not in kind of the jerky way sort of thing. He was just oblivious to the social cues.
I think there's also room to roll those numbers into like issues that your character could have that could build more of a backstory for them as well. Like, for example, if somebody's low intelligence in numbers, like the number is low, it doesn't necessarily have to mean they're not smart. They could actually be super, super smart, but have like focus problems or something where, or if you have, if someone has like a chronic illness that makes them tired all the time, like they have a low constitution, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't like, eat the berries that you found in the woods or whatever. Like it's specific to like that character and like their particular circumstance at whatever times it would come into play. And that could also give you more things to know about your character and like how, like a little bit of a guide for like how to play them.
Yeah. And another stat to consider too that I think is also underutilized would be the types of weapon you're picking up as well. I think as an example, going to something just a little popular, maybe one or two people have heard of them, but with Critical Role Liam, as he did in Exandria and Orm in Campaign 3, often when he did his attacks, he always described them. He ducked under them. He did the cool goading attack and then had the blades flip around and stuff. And I had a character with his staff where he always made a point to try to hold back and with his attacks, and would do a lot of specific one-handed moves until the point that he would get serious, which he'd grow up into a two-handed action.
That's very anime,
right? Yeah, very, very Kenpachi.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Proficiencies in general is actually I think a good one when looping into your characters, because again, you mentioned weapons, but it could also be proficiencies in instruments or proficiencies in tools. One of the ones that I folded in a little while back was cartography. So one of the characters was proficient in cartographer's tools, and I think it was from the background that I had given them, and then that folded in a lot to the story of what they were doing. The character had a lot of maps on them, had a lot of like map knowledge, which even blended into your character Ginger, who tried to steal one of his maps at some point before the campaign actually started. So yeah, I mean, definitely ways proficiencies can have a pretty big impact, but vice versa, or multiple ways on the actual story, or how, or maybe you pick a particular tool because of your background choice.
You also blended, like almost all of your characters have a big use of their tool proficiencies. You had Lex with his wood carving. You had your second character, the cartographer, and then you even had your third character with the doll making, although that might be just a different kind of flavor. But I believe, even like the flute and stuff like that, your instruments, and yeah, you're a bard, but like that, not all bards need to use their instruments.
Yeah, I really like to use it to like fill almost like conversations too. So yeah, you mentioned like Lex, one of my previous characters that had wood carving, and I think early on we met. I don't remember exactly where it was. We were staying somewhere at an inn, and there was a family, and he was just kind of working on a carving and gave the carving to a kid that was there who looked sad or something, and it was like a way to build up who he was as a person. At that time, not who he would finish the campaign as, because things happened to him, of course, but who he was at that point. And yeah, and even the current person I'm playing, Silica has the doll making. And initially it actually was part of her backstory, and now it's almost part of the skills that she can use too, because she can basically craft her own components.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to proficiencies and things like that, especially if it's something that they're doing just because they like doing it, it definitely informs a lot about the character. Because like, if you think about real life, it's like, okay, how much time do we spend on our hobbies? Obviously a lot. How much time do you talk about your hobby with people that aren't into your hobby? Also, probably a lot. We're doing a podcast about it, so it
I was about
can
to
spill
say,
over.
and then they made a podcast.
And then they made a podcast. And when they ran out of people that hadn't listened about their hobby, they had to go find a bunch of strangers on the internet. Yeah, so like those things, especially if it's like a creative thing, a lot of times are sort of compulsory. Like you don't really have a choice about them. You just sort of do them intrinsically as like a part of who you are as a person. So that can definitely be a big part of your character if they're really into like one kind of craft or tool or another thing. My current character took expertise in deception out of sheer fear that she was going to have to lie to someone with high insight. And it's working great so far.
Yeah, and of course, like all this being said, you never have to use every single aspect of your sheet, nor should you. Some of that stuff should be ignored, but it's just a cool aspect to throw in one or two things here or there, and everything can have their niche purpose. It's just like during combat, Silica may not be building her dolls and stuff like that, or Lex with his wood carving, but at the downtime, that's the opportunity to bring it up and do a little bit more with that as well. Another aspect, kind of going into what you were saying as well, would be skills are an excellent way because they can kind of help round out your character with a little more fleshing out to either the stats or the tools they're using and stuff. Like obviously you got the nature person who is potentially proficient in nature, and animal handling is a pretty common thing, especially with druids. Not saying they have to, but they can be. Or even the fun point is where you're a rogue but you have no expertise in stealth or sleight of hand, and then they constantly ask, what do you do? And you're like, I'm sorry, I'm just not that kind of rogue.
I actually just realized this because you said it. You said about rogues and stuff. I have been playing a rogue this entire campaign, and I don't think I've lockpicked anything.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think one time I had to do it. Huh.
Yeah.
My favorite example of that is, and you actually see this quite a bit, clerics that have absolutely no pluses to religion.
Yeah, that's a pretty common one as well. Which again, it's the surprising of it, but it's one of those things that tends to happen.
Yeah, druids with no nature and clerics with no religion proficiency, a lot more common than you'd think.
Or really any strength character with no athletics, which is just why.
Yeah.
And then even the kind of tweaking stuff too, like one of the most common ones for skills is changing intimidation to a strength, because a hulking burly guy just saying step back is probably pretty intimidating to someone. And so often, especially barbarians, would like to change intimidation to strength. And I've done that as well because I think it's a much more fun aspect. And honestly, I think another aspect with skills, as well as we talk about characters that should be proficient in something that's not, but the opposite, I think it'd be hilarious to have a barbarian who's super good with Arcana because he just doesn't trust magic and like, nah, I'm not going to be fooled by this. And even though with it being an intelligence stat and you may have a dumb stat to it as well, so it gives at least that little bit of bonus where he's like trying to be always on top of that.
Or even working off of what you were just saying, like the mage slayer rogue. I think it's rogue that has that as an option, but where like they're a rogue, but because they're like so focused on taking out mages or something, they actually have a lot of knowledge in like the arcane arts or spells or other things, just because not that they use it, but they are always trying to stop it.
Yeah. You should know what you're up against to know how to counter it. And then on the other aspects, like obviously the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws are the easy ones because they usually directly are made for other aspects of your character to kind of point out. And while you always want to try to have them be sometimes party friendly, not I'm a loner, in say like your flaw or personality trait or stuff like that, they can kind of have fun aspects. And usually it's always fun to have them be something that has meaning behind just it's there.
And it can also start out as just something that's there that you can build on as you get to know
Fair
that
too.
character better, like a prompt almost. I like
For sure.
prompts.
Yeah, and I mean flaws like you were just saying that can be it can be something really big, or you can take it like one piece of it. Your character is paranoid, right? That someone could take that and be like real extreme, like they don't talk to anyone else, they don't trust anyone else, they don't do anything with anyone else. Or it could just be like they're just always questioning people, like someone that says, oh, maybe we should do this, and they're just like, why do you want to do that? And then that in that case it's like a much smaller way of looking at it, but it's still something towards the character themselves. But yeah, definitely different amounts you can pull from flaws and quirks and other things.
Yeah, and sometimes that same exact flaw splits the party for 3 years. So,
And sometimes that same exact flaw has a bell ring and you go into a fit of rage and kill your parents.
oh,
These are all things that have happened.
poor man Vag. We need to check on him. We haven't talked to him in a few weeks. We got to make sure he's okay.
Oh, I'm sure they're all with us now.
Yeah, nothing bad happened to them.
Oh God.
Find out next time.
So I don't like the way you say things.
What?
Any of the things that you say, I just don't like it.
I may or may not have intent behind it. I'm sorry.
There's the next great topic. What things the DM says that somehow become part of your character because you're afraid.
All of the things.
Even though he meant nothing behind it.
Every single thing.
Or gaslight yourself over and over again.
Yeah, exactly.
How to send your players into a panic. 101. Ask, are you sure you want to do that? 102. What? Don't worry about it.
Would your character do that? Like, wait, why is he asking?
Ask them random questions. And when they ask, why'd you ask that? You go, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
You'll never know now.
I mean, you probably will know. It's just not yet. Don't worry about it.
Oh, God.
This is literally what we deal with every week.
What?
Every single Friday afternoon, I'm just like, cool, I'm going to throw up. Let's do this.
It's okay, folks. She wants to feel like she wants to throw up.
My real life anxiety coming at me out of that one's face across the computer and into my ears.
Speaking of real life anxiety, even saving throws could be used into figuring out some of your character stats or personalities and how they would do it. If they're not really good at, say, dodge and constitution, then, it kind of rolls into the same aspect of the stats as, like, why are you constantly getting hit by that? It's like, I just can't see it coming. I'm sorry. Like, I physically, fire for some reason. I sort of freeze, and then I fail my dexterity checks on those fireballs.
Or you could go the opposite and just think you're super invincible, like Drax style. Like, nothing could get past me. I would catch it.
That's probably what the Silica route does, thinking that she's really good at, dodging stuff, but then in fact she's too slow to dodge anything.
You did completely evade that fireball a couple weeks ago, and I was really impressed.
It was good that I did, because I probably would have been dead again if I didn't.
What?
Yep.
This was a friendly fireball too.
Yep. That would be a great vinyl sticker, the friendly fireball.
Right? And it's just got a nice little smiley face on it.
Yeah, now I want one.
Alignment's also another one of those obvious choices that can affect your character. While not everyone typically uses their alignment, or they use one aspect, they either use the chaotic, lawful, neutral, or they use the good, evil, neutral aspect. But I think having those as a baseline to kind of tailor I would say start your character off with, kind of going the perhaps Captain America route, where he has these values and he sticks to them no matter what, or you have a more, I'm trying to think of another character. Hold on. No, someone who was virtuous but found the flaws in the system.
Hawkeye.
He just didn't really care.
Randy, the face that you made.
I know.
The face that you just made. Hawkeye, I think, actually is a great example of a character who went from a lawful, good alignment to being the Ronin and being the opposite and then back again.
I forgot about the Ronin. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, he's still lawful, but definitely changes the other side.
Yeah, that's actually a good point where Hawkeye switches between going from lawful to chaotic. Actually, I would say lawful good, lawful neutral maybe. Trying to be a good person, but he does a lot of the spy and stuff like that, which may not necessarily be inherently good. He does what the agents want, or the agents of Shield, of course, wants him to do. Only questioning morality every now and then.
Well, the Ronin was like a vigilante, and the Avenger was technically working for someone, but ultimately it was actually Hydra. So are they really different?
Yeah,
the difference is
that's
he didn't
true.
know. The only difference is he thought they were good
That's also
when
true.
he was working for them.
But yeah, so I mean that Hawkeye is definitely a good example where having the lawful paladin, for example, and then going off and changing it over time based off what the campaign provides you, or doing the best you can to stick to your alignment and try to keep those virtues and hold true, or be a character who just does whatever pops up and then evolves into a whole different character by the end of the campaign.
So I've also liked the range on alignments. So I think more of my recent characters have been neutral, and I've enjoyed that because then you can kind of take the character in different directions depending on what happens or what goes on during the different sessions, or what they encounter, or what they have to deal with. But I guess then on the flip side of that, I've also had characters where, they were good to start or lawful to start, and you kind of base their perspective on that. And then you could still change it from there. Maybe it just takes more dramatic things to make them shift. But overall, I would say it the alignments themselves can have a pretty big range to them. I mean, someone can do still some relatively like good or bad things, but be neutral. Because it's just on the overall, or maybe their general mindset.
A great example as well that I always love to go to that a lot of people know would be Thanos, because he thought he was the hero of his story, and he thought he was the only one doing what was not right, but what was needed for the betterment of the entirety of the universe.
Or Jack from Borderlands 2.
Yeah, that's another good one as well. Jack also had a very cynical side, though. He definitely was a more evil aspect.
Yeah.
But I do get where he still thought he was the hero, yes.
Sometimes that's just called a narcissist.
Oh, yeah, he was a hardcore narcissist. I think Thanos is the better example of a character who just believed he was doing right. Did what needed to, and didn't let anyone get in his way, which it definitely towed the line. Obviously, he was an evil person in the end, because he thought that was the only method, and that's kind of what villains typically do, is they have, this is the only way, and I'm going to make sure it comes out to this, when a good character is often like, no, there's other options.
So what you're saying is compromise and friendship is the key to not becoming evil.
And My Little Pony's taught us a lot.
It really has.
It really has.
I don't understand.
Friendship is the magic that we made along the way, Tukey.
I think I missed something along the way.
Be friends with us.
And then he never showed up again.
Going dark.
Hopefully the goblins don't get you too.
Wait, what goblins?
You'll never know. You shouldn't have stopped being friends with us so soon.
So, and another part of the character sheet that I've put into play only once, and I think it's a pretty rarity and semi-difficult to use, but languages. I had a character who had a lower intelligence score, but it was because they spoke broken English, broken Common, because Common wasn't their first language. But when you talk to them in Orcish, suddenly he was fluent and had full words and sentences and conversations to it.
Yeah, that's really fun. And I've seen posts before where people have actually translated that for people that wanted to start playing with their friends, but actually did have English as a second language, and segue that into getting more comfortable speaking it over time by making it a character point of their character as they played, which I think is also really cool.
Yeah, one of the most, I think, comfortable ways to play a character is putting especially first characters and stuff, is putting your flaw into a character to a degree. That way that you don't have to consciously try to avoid something that you may not be able to avoid in real life, like stuttering or something, for example.
I've also, on the topic of languages, I've totally had a character in the past where I just had to pick another language, had no preference or no idea what to pick for it. So I just grabbed something really random, hoping I'd have run into that moment where someone that was talking in that language and I could just understand them and just throw them off completely.
There's also been other aspects where you had a party with elves and they all speak Elvish, and you're a character who also speaks Elvish, but you've never spoken to them with it. So you think you're talking behind their back, and they're like, I could understand you the whole campaign. Like, wow.
For that, you have to be good at keeping secrets.
Yeah.
I'm really bad.
Oh, well, of course. I'm really good at keeping secrets. So I'd be that person that at some point just be like knifing you in the end of the night. Like, wow, you said some really heinous stuff to me in Elvish.
You're good at not telling what the secrets are, but we can always tell when you have one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love being that person who's like, hey, I got a surprise. But
you like to lord it over us forever and let us imagine the worst possible thing that it could actually be, and then it turns out it's nothing like that ever.
Yeah.
See, I'm just also terrible with. Well, I'm just terrible in general with secrets, because as soon as I have one, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this with other people or something. Or the other thing I've talked to Randy about, where it's like going against other players, for example, is something I'll also have a really hard time with. Like me, the person, not the player, the character itself. So like sometimes I just have to build that into the character.
Yeah, and I'm a person in real life who has the conflicting flaw of I really like surprises, but I also really like the emotion behind the reveal of the surprise. So it's conflicting where I'm like, but I love to build the suspense of it, but I really just want to show it to you.
You got to get that dopamine hit of getting the secret out.
Yeah, exactly. But luckily I get the dopamine hit of just giving you guys the anticipation of the surprise. So that kind of works too, where, you know, the anxiousness of people go, tell me. It's still that good dopamine hit.
Just like watching us squirm.
Yes.
Or just find a random person on the street and tell them about it just to get it out. And then they look at you all confused, like, why are you talking to me?
That's a good point too, is finding another person that isn't involved in the campaign that you can have an outlet to talk about your what's going on. And I mean, especially being a DM, it's one of those things where I'm like, I've got this whole big story built up and blah, blah, blah with this. One of our players was a bystander of it before, and before he joined us, I'd be telling him about this story. Funny enough, he joined the same campaign that I was spoiling things on, but he didn't remember it, so it was perfect.
You can always confide in us. You can just tell us what's going on.
Yeah, we're here. We're here for you. We're here for you, Randy.
You guys keep notes and have these bookmarks, and then ask me a million other questions. No.
Okay, the problem is I don't take notes, but I keep saying I should.
Yeah, see, and that's just a whole different discussion, honestly.
We're like a year into this campaign. If you haven't taken notes by now,
yeah, you're not going.
It ain't happening.
And I just built that into the character. They had someone who was taking notes for them in the world. So why would I, the player, take notes? Someone else says it.
Yeah, it was me, and I've literally gone insane. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're doing great at your job. See, I never had to take notes.
So much information.
And I mean, we could probably talk about a whole segment on the class levels and backgrounds, since we barely got to touch upon those, considering, like you kind of said, a cleric without the religion and stuff. And classes are one of the biggest examples of how to roll your personality and how the character functions into the design of the character. It's, I would say, arguably just as important as the traits.
Yeah, absolutely. I picked cleric because I'm too poor for therapy, and I wanted to explore deconstruction in a D&D game just as much as I've explored it in real life.
Yeah.
Wait, why did I pick a rogue then?
We are not going to talk. You're that's a whole other podcast. Get to your problems.
Oh,
Yeah, is your degree even real, or did you just steal it?
No, I found it. It's real. I mean, I lost it for a little bit, but I'm pretty sure I have it. It's somewhere.
Is the original owner in the sub basement?
No?
Yes.
So let's go to a flash round.
Flash round, flash round, flash round. Flash round time. This is where we take turns picking one aspect of a character that anyone can use. If you play one, let us know who or what they conquer. All right, you two, roll initiative.
Well, I just rolled a 7, so I'm probably going last now.
18.
I don't know what the order is, but I rolled a 17.
Ha, sucker.
So it looks like we got Ginger, Randy, and then me.
All right, for race, I'm going to pick my favorite and say that she is a Yuan-Ti pureblood.
Oh, looky. Oh, I get to pick the class this time. Okay. So for class, let's see. Yuan-Ti. Well, it would just, there's no other kind of Yuan-Ti than an artificer.
Really?
Is there not?
I feel like that's not a thing.
I don't know. Like you don't think about like Yuan-Ti and like snakes with like mechs or something?
It's pretty sick.
Just me? Okay.
It's pretty sick, though.
Great. So now I have to pick a subclass off of that, huh?
I do like that.
Right.
Let's go with Battlesmith for no real reason.
Battle snakes. Okay. Appearance. I think she looks like an emerald green tree boa. So she's like green, like really bright green on the back half, and then like really yellow on the underscales, and has like really, really sharp retractable fangs, and long black hair and green eyes.
Okay. For background, she should definitely be an entertainer of sorts, with the whole like, look at me, I'm a snake mech thing, and people are gonna find that interesting at least.
Does she moonlight as like a Gundam on the weekends on Hollywood Boulevard?
Yes, and then the number one question is, what's a Gundam?
This is a great way to get Gundams into your games, folks.
All right, for flaw, I'm going to go with, let's see, she's Battlesmith. So I'm going to say that she's always assessing everyone's equipment. Just has to. Like every time she meets new people, she just starts assessing them. Probably pretty negatively.
I just realized we've created Wenry as a snake person.
I love it.
Her quirk is that she really wants to eat kinkus. Because I'm basing her off a tree boa and they eat birds. I don't think she acts on it, but it's just like, it's a compulsion she has that she just thinks they look delicious.
So she meets a Kenku and just slowly starts unhinging her jaw towards them.
Or like if any bird people ever hug her, she hugs them back just like a little too tight,
Except that her phobia is she's afraid that they won't taste good. So she's always so like she always wants to eat them, but she's always hesitant because but it's just like that one dish of food that you always think is going to be amazing, but you're afraid that it's never going to live up to your expectations, so you don't actually act upon it.
Because it was so great that one time, and it'll never be that good again.
Or that
It'll always be a disappointment.
Just like me.
All right, and then their trinket, I'm going to say it's a lucky rabbit's foot, but you're not 100% sure. It could just be a herringon foot.
Whoa.
But who really knows?
I've noticed that our trinkets are always dark, and I don't know what that says about us.
Nothing at all.
Okay, and her name is going to be Zahara.
Fancy.
Zahara.
Sounds exotic.
Exactly. Roll credits. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this session and want to hear more, you can find us on Twitter at DysFictionalPod for our latest updates and downloads.
Original music for this podcast is provided by Joshua Silver, the artist known as Dimonon on Spotify.
Oh, and good luck with that ASMR atheist idea.